Uh, we did these questions yesterday. Now we
Yeah.
are continuing with the
Can
remaining
you,
questions.
uh, can you explain question number 16 again?
Question number 16. Okay, question number 16. So question
Yes.
number 16, basically they are asking which formula should be the correct for the speed v of ocean wave in terms of density rho of seawater, the acceleration of free fall g, the height, the depth h of the ocean, and the wavelength lambda. Now the thing is,
Mm.
they don't expect you to know all these formulas. Okay, they don't expect you to know all of these formulas. What they actually want you to do is they want you to guess these answers. So
Mm.
how will you guess it?
Right.
You will basically compare the units on both sides. Compare the units on both sides. So what does that mean? That means basically you have you will consider these options one by one. So first you will go with one. If it does not fit the answer, then you will go with option B, then with option C, and then with option D. Okay, so we check the first one, and what happened was on the left side we got this meter per second, and on the left side we got g lambda. G is basically acceleration. G is
Mm.
the acceleration of free fall. So
Mm.
this is meter per second square. Meter
Right.
per
Per
second
seconds.
square. And
Understood.
lambda is basically in meters. Lambda is always in meters.
Mm.
So this will be multiplied by meters. So this will become meter square second to the power of minus 2. And this will give me, because the square root is over this whole operation. So basically what will happen is you can just write it like this. M minus, this is basically whole square if I want to write. Wait. Yeah. So what will happen is this square root and this square will cancel and you will get this meter per second. And as we can see, we have meter per second on both sides. So on the left side, we have meter per second from V. On the right side, we have meter per second from this expression. So that's why we did A. A is correct then. Okay.
The sign after G is Linda.
The, sorry, can you
What
repeat?
is the sign? No, this. What is the sign after the G under, and then what's that's
In this option?
wavelength? Yeah, that's wavelength after G.
Yeah. Yeah. G lambda. Yeah. That is wavelength. The unit of wavelength is meter. Because wavelength, as you can see, wavelength, it is also a length. So it is also measured in meters. What is wavelength?
Right.
Basically, you will study if you have a wave like this. Okay. So wavelength basically tells you the distance between the distance that are in phase. Any two points that are in phase. So basically, this point and this point, these are in phase. So wavelength will tell you this distance. This is basically one wavelength of this wave. This is one wavelength.
Right.
Similarly, if I choose this point and this point, this is also one wavelength. This is also one wavelength. Okay, so that's one wavelength basically. It is also in meters. So that's why we choose meter over here. The unit of wavelength is meter. Okay, clear? Clear?
Yeah, clear.
Okay. Now let's move down. I wanted to do question number 21. A quantity x is measured many times. The graph is plotted showing the number n of times a particular value of x is obtained. X has a true value x naught. Okay, so there is a true value x naught, and we are basically measuring x. They are saying which graph should be obtained if the measurement of x has a large systematic error but a small random error. Now look at this case. If there was random error, so let me explain each of these graphs. Out of these graphs, so basically out of these graphs, this one is the most accurate one because the value of x that we are getting is on top of x naught, and it is very precise. So it is not
Mm.
varying very much. So it is just between, it is very close to x. All the values are very close to x. You see, all the values of x that we have obtained are very close to the actual value. So there is less
Right.
random error and less systematic error in this one. No systematic error. Systematic error, we know
Mm.
there is no systematic error because the value of x that we have obtained is just straight above x naught. It is actually equal to the actual value. So there is no systematic error. How, now in
Right.
this, if you look at this option B, again, there is no systematic error because the value, actual value that we have, actual value is actually close to the value that we have obtained, they both are very close, like almost equal. So that's why we can say there is no systematic error. But here there is random errors because the values are more spread. Random error causes the values to be spread out, basically. Okay, so there are more values. So basically there is one value over here. There might be another value over here. In this case, there was no value over here. It was 0. N was 0. It means there was no value of x at which we found x to be equal to this quantity over here. If like let's say if x naught is 5, so this means that all of the values of x were between 6 and 4, let's say. Okay, in this case it means if the value of x naught was 5, now all the values are from 0 to, let's say, 10. Okay, most of the values are still around 5. Most of the values, you can see the peak is over here. The peak is over here. It means most of the values are like around 5. There is no systematic error. But the thing is, due to the random errors, the values are spread out.
Right.
Okay, that's what it means. Now in the option C, you will see the graph has moved over here. So the graph should be over here because the actual value is 5. So if our measurements were accurate, then this would have been our graph. But the thing is, the graph is over here, over this value. Now this means, let's say this is our value of x. So basically this is our systematic error. This is our magnitude of systematic error. It has affected our reading, that it has made our experiment inaccurate. Okay, so that's why we say it is systematic error. And in this case, we have both systematic error and random error. In this case, we don't have random error, but we have only systematic error. In this case, we have both random error because the values are spread out, and systematic error because they are not actually at the actual value. They are away from the actual value. So basically, I have explained each of these graphs. Now let's look at what they are asking. They are asking, what would be the graph if x has a large systematic error, but a small random error? So the random error is small. It means the values are not spread out. Okay, so values are precise actually. So values are basically like option A or B. The values are not like B or D. That would be the case if there were random errors. And they are saying there is no random error, there is small random error, but large systematic error. So we can see in A there is no systematic error because the value is actually on top of the original graph. There, the systematic error is on option C, so we will go with option C. Okay, why? Because there are two things. First, due to the systematic error, this graph has moved over here away from the actual value. And second thing is there is less random error in this one. Okay, as compared to D. Clear? So
What
that's
is
why.
the main difference between systematic and random error?
So systematic error basically affects all values, and basically what it does is it takes our values, all values, away from the actual value. So basically, if I'm measuring length, I gave you the example of that scale. All my values will be shifted by 1 centimeter. All my values,
From
right?
the actual value.
Yeah. So basically, the error will basically come in my final value, and I will not be able to get any accurate readings. Okay. But the random error is basically, it works like, you might, the parallax error, basically the parallax error is a random error. Why? Because like, let's see, if you have a scale like this, parallax error happens basically when you have some length to measure. So let's say you're measuring this length and you have your eye over here. Let's say you have your eye over here, and when you're looking from here, what you will see is basically, you might see the length to be somewhere around here. So you might record this length instead of recording the actual length, which will be this, right? And similarly, if you look from another angle, like from here, in that case, you might you might see this length as the actual length. Okay. The thing is, in parallax error, this is pretty random. You can either increase it by some value or decrease it by some value. But if you take a lot of values, the parallax error will automatically cancel itself out because it will be in different directions, right? However, if you have a zero error on your scale, like I said, like if your scale is wrong, in that case, there will be a 1 centimeter error in all of your values and it will not be cancelled out. Okay. So that's basically the effect of systematic and random errors. Systematic errors basically affect your accuracy, in short, and the random errors, they affect your precision.
The A is not the option because the
Yeah, because it is
Because
the
the
most accurate
answer is
one.
no.
There is
Yeah,
in
the
A there is small random error, so it satisfies one condition. There is small random error, as we can see. The values are not deviating much, but the thing is there is no systematic error in it. The value that we are getting is actually the actual value. X naught is the actual value, right? And we are getting
Yes.
our graph is basically above it, so we know that this is true. So in A there is no systematic error.
Right. Got
It
it.
is only C that satisfies both conditions, so we will go with C. So 22 is a simple one. Which of the following is a scalar quantity?
Mass.
Mass, exactly, yeah. The unit of work, the joule, may be defined as the work done when the point of application is okay. Okay. So they are giving you the definition of work, and they are asking you to find the unit of work. So let's see how they are defining it. Okay. The joule may be defined as the work done when the point of application of a force of 1 Newton is moved by a distance of 1 meter in the direction of the force. So 1 Newton, you apply a force of 1 Newton and basically your object moves a distance of 1 meter in direction of force. You don't need to actually do this. You can even use the formula. So all you need to do is, you can see it is W is equal to FD, right?
FD for
FD,
perpendicular distance.
you remember this? This is the formula for work. And we know
Yes.
the formula for the unit for F is Newton. We want to take SI units, like base units. We want to write in base units. Newton is not a base unit. Force is a derived quantity. So we want to convert it
Yeah.
into base units. So what we do? We can
MA.
MA. So work done
Mass
is
time.
mad. It is mad. Work done is mad. Okay. So
Meter per second.
let's change it into units now. So this will be
Meter
kg.
per second.
Mass will be kg. Acceleration will
Yes.
be meter second minus 2, and d will be meter. So this meter
Hmm.
and this meter will multiply, and you will basically
So
get
it's B. B.
kg. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So kg
Meter square
meter
second.
square
Meter second.
second to the
One.
power of minus 2. So this will be our answer, B. Okay.
Oh.
Now let's move to the next one. Which experimental technique reduces the systematic error of the quantity being investigated? So I have told you systematic error is the one that is basically in every oscillation. So the thing is, when you have random error, so let's say there is some source of random error. Let's say you are conducting an experiment, okay, and let's say your experiment is like you are measuring the time of a pendulum, okay. You have a pendulum, and you are determining the time of that pendulum, okay.
Hmm.
So let's say in the first case, when you take the first reading, what you do is you press the stopwatch button a bit late, and due to that you get a larger value of time than the actual value,
Hmm.
okay. Now the thing is, if you take more readings, what will happen is eventually, because there will be some random error in all of them, okay. You cannot basically make the random error zero. There will be always some random error. So the thing is, in some readings you will like take the time more than the actual value, and in some readings your time will be less than the actual value. And the thing is, when you will take a lot of readings and then you will take their average, you will see that all the random errors will be basically minimized in the average. The more readings you take, the closer you will get to your actual value. Okay, so that's one way
Hmm.
of reducing the random error. But then you have the systematic error. So systematic error, basically, I told you zero error. So do you remember zero error from O levels?
We didn't did zero error in O
So
level.
zero error,
So
basically, it is the like if you remember, I gave you the example of the scale that is calibrated wrong. So basically, if a scale that starts
yeah.
from 1 centimeter, that is an example of zero error. The zero is actually not at zero. So the thing is,
Hmm.
if you do an experiment using that scale and you are measuring the length, you will get all your readings wrong. No matter how many readings you take, no matter how many readings you take, all your readings will be away by 1 centimeter, and your final answer
Wrong.
will be also away by 1 centimeter. Even if you take 1,000 readings, because a systematic error will be present in every reading equally. In case of random
Yeah.
errors, they vary. And the thing is, when they vary and you take the average, all of them are basically minimized. In case of systematic error, all of them affect your readings equally. So now they are saying,
Hmm.
which experiment technique reduces the systematic error of the quantity being investigated? So the options are adjusting a emitter, to remove with zero error before measuring a current. So in emitter there is also zero error. So let's say what will be the example of a zero error in an emitter? So basically, let's say you have an emitter that looks like this, and this is your scale. So let's say this is 0, this is 1, this is 2, this is 3,
2.
this is 4, let's say. And now the thing is, instead of starting, so let's say when your current is 0, it should be at 0, it should be at this point. But let's say it is not. Let's say it is at this point, like at
Yes.
0.5 ampere. The thing is, when you will conduct the experiment, all your readings will be like, all the readings that you will get will be 0.5 amperes more than the actual values. So your final answer of the average will be also 0.5 ampere more than the actual answer. Okay, so zero error always causes systematic error. Zero error is a systematic error, but the other errors like parallax error, they don't carry equally. Okay, so they count in random errors. So you just have to like remember this. All you have to think is, does your, like, if you are asked like if a certain error is like random or systematic, you need to think if this error affects all readings equally. If it does, then it is a systematic error. If it doesn't, if it like varies, then it is a random error. Okay, like air resistance. What will be air resistance? What do you think?
Air resistance would be systematic.
Yeah, it will. Yeah, if you think about it, it is kind of systematic if you count it. But the thing is, in
Yeah.
experiments, it does not. Okay, so yeah, let's keep it with systematic, because like the thing is, it will affect all your readings equally when you are doing the experiment, almost equally. It is kind of random plus systematic. Why is it random? Because the thing is, air can vary. Let's say you are conducting, like, let's say there is a certain blow of wind. In that case, it will oppose the experiment a bit more. And the thing is, it is basically, air resistance is always random mostly. It is systematic when you are at like large distance, when you're like throwing objects at a large distance, but mostly it is random. Why? Because like, let's say if your pendulum is moving in this direction, let's say like this, and the wind is also in this direction, in that case the wind will push your pendulum forwards. In that case it will increase the time period. But if your pendulum is moving like this over here, and the wind is like this, in that case it will oppose it, right? So it can affect in both ways. So this is a random error. It depends on the wind, and wind is random. Similarly, if you take example of let's say okay, so in like when we conduct experiments with liquids, so let's say you have a liquid in a container like a beaker, let's say. The thing is, at the end of the liquids, a meniscus forms. So basically like this is a meniscus. This is a meniscus, and the meniscus can be either like this or like this. So you can either have a meniscus that looks like this, or you can have a meniscus that looks like this. What do you think this will cause? A random error or systematic error?
A random error.
Random error, because it can either increase the volume or decrease the volume. And when you will take a lot of readings, all these values will basically cancel themselves out. So basically you will be left with true value. So you can basically avoid this by taking more average. So whenever you have random error, the solution is take more readings and average them. Whenever you have a systematic error, it means there is some fault in your equipment and you need to work on it. You cannot just remove that error by taking average. Random error can be easily removed by taking average. So that's an important point. Okay, so now out of these options, which one do you think is the most accurate one?
Which experiment reduces the systematic error of the quantity system and our method before current method is standing right distance weighing the diameter by repeating calculating the average time and the number of solutions. D.
Which one?
D.
D.
Yeah.
So this one is actually, I've told you, like when you have random error, what you do is you take a large number of readings and then you average them. That's what you do for random errors. So if the question was like, which experiment technique reduces the random error of the quantity being investigated, then we will go for D. They are asking for systematic error. So whenever you have systematic error, always go for the equipment, because systematic error is always caused by the equipment. Random error is caused by the surroundings mostly, and systematic error is caused by the equipment. So which of these do you think? If you see,
caused by the
if you see C and D, they both are basically for random errors, because you are measuring more, you're taking more readings and then you are taking the average in C and D. So both of them are for random errors. They are not for this one. Even B. If you look at B is for this one too. So you are measuring several distances, and then you are finding a mean distance. That is,
yeah, the A
all
could be
these,
the right option
yeah,
because you're using an ammeter. That's an equipment.
yeah, all of these are for random error. So A is the correct one. A is for systematic error. Okay. A student make measurements from which calculates the speed of sound as 327.66 meter per second. She estimates that her result is accurate to plus minus 3%. Okay, so I think there is this section. Okay, there is this small section. I think we should focus on this now. Let me just go there quickly. So we did this fractional uncertainty. We did the normal uncertainty. This is this
Yeah.
PDF where we
Can
did
you
all those.
upload these so I can go
Yeah,
through
yeah.
them?
I will upload them once we complete the chapter. I will upload them once we do all the questions, because I think I'll still have to add some things. You know, like when we are doing chapters, I may have to add some things sometimes. So there is this type of uncertainty that we don't use much, but like they might still ask you about it. So this is percentage uncertainty, and this is not very important. Then this is not very difficult to understand either. All you need to do is, let me just
First, we was fractional uncertainty and now percentage uncertainty.
yeah. So all you need to do is just okay. Let me show. Fractional uncertainty multiplied by 100 is equal to, let me write over here. So basically, percentage uncertainty is equal to fractional uncertainty multiplied by 100. So this is as simple as that. So basically, if you have a quantity A, let's say, so A, the fractional uncertainty of A is dA by A, right? This is the fractional uncertainty of A, dA over the actual value of A. So for determining the percentage uncertainty, let's show it like this: percentage dA, let's say. To find this value, what you need to do is you just need to multiply this with 100.
Yeah.
Just like a normal percentage. We know how percentages work, right? So whenever you have a percentage, so let's say if I ask you to convert 1 by 5 into a percentage, what will you do? You will multiply it with 100, right? So you will tell me it is 20%. It's 20%. So the same goes for basically this. Okay, let me just erase this part over here. So you see, not very difficult. Once you convert it into a fractional uncertainty, once you convert a percentage uncertainty into a fractional uncertainty, then it is easier. Okay, so let's go back to our question now. Now they've given us, this is the percentage uncertainty, plus minus 3%. So we know that percentage uncertainty is equal to fractional uncertainty multiplied by 100, right?
100
So if I
times
want to
100.
find the fractional uncertainty, what should I do? F is equal to P over 100.
Yep.
Percentage
Uncertainty
over 100. Okay.
So 3
This
over
will be,
100 plus minus 3
yeah.
over 100.
So this will be 0.03. This is the fractional uncertainty now. Now we know what is
Plus
fractional. Yeah, plus
plus
minus.
minus
Yeah, plus minus you can say 0.3. But this is plus minus I'm not putting here because in fractional uncertainty we don't usually put plus minus. So you can just try like 0.03. So 0.03 is basically what is equal to what? 0.03 is basically equal to the uncertainty in F in let's say if our quantity is sound, the quantity is sound, right? The speed of sound. So let's say ds over s. This is basically equal to 0.03. That's what they are saying. Okay.
Right.
Is this point clear?
Clear.
So this is basically the definition of fractional uncertainty. So when you know the fractional uncertainty, you can just do this. And we know that the speed is, this is the speed that she calculated, 327.66. So the uncertainty will be equal to 327.6 multiplied by 0.03. Now let's find the uncertainty in her answer. The uncertainty will be 327.6 into 0.03. And the answer is 9.8. This is 9.8.
9.8.
9.8. This is the uncertainty, plus minus 9.8. So her answer can be off by almost 10. Now here this argument, okay? The argument is that, let's say, if you have an uncertainty of plus minus 10, do you really need to put many signatures? Like let's say I'm putting 327.66 and my uncertainty is 10. Do you think I really need to put these? Are these really accurate? These are not very accurate. Okay, these are not very accurate here.
No.
Why? Because like I know that the uncertainty is 10. So basically up to this digit, this is not, I don't need to be very accurate. I can just say 330 and be done with it. Okay? Because it can be like plus minus 10. So the thing is, if you have like this 9.8, what you need to do is you can round it off to, let's say, plus minus 10. This is almost plus minus 10. And I know that my reading can be off by almost 10 digits. So what do I need to do?
So you can basically round it off to nearest 10.
Yeah, to the nearest 10.
To nearest 10.
Exactly. So we'll round it off to the nearest 10, and this will be rounded off to 330.
330.
Okay. So this one and this uncertainty and this one, they both should be rounded off to the same unit, because it would not make sense if I'm writing 327.66 plus minus 10. What's the use of writing 0.66 there?
Right.
If it can change by plus minus 10. Okay, so I will put 330 over here. So this will be my correct answer. Okay. A steel rule can be read to the nearest millimeter. It is used to measure the length of a bar whose true length is 895. Repeated measurements give the following readings. Are the readings accurate and precise? Okay, so they're asking accurate and precise. So first look at them. Are they precise? Are they close to each other?
Yes, they are. Definitely.
They are close to each other. Okay, it means yes, they are precise. So first thing we'll do is yes, they are precise. So this is either this one or this one. Now, results are accurate to within 1 millimeter. So the actual reading is 895.
Yeah,
right?
That's no.
No.
Other option is
this one or this one. So we know that this one option, this is correct. Now, if I ask you, is there a random error in these readings? What will you tell me? You can tell me yes, there is, but it is very, very small. The random error is so small that the readings are only varying by 1 millimeter. That's how small it is. And now if I ask you, is there a systematic error? What will you say?
There is.
There is a systematic error. And the value of that systematic error is around 3.5 centimeter, because my value is coming out to be 891.5 and my actual value is 895. If I average these readings, this will give me almost.
You took a mean, basically, right?
What?
A mean. Add them all and divide by the number.
Yeah, so the mean, basically, you can see the mean of these readings is a bit away from the mean is basically away from the actual reading. So we know that this is not accurate. This is not accurate to 1 millimeter. So this is no, this is yes, and we will say B. So now you understand the concept of accuracy and precision and systematic error and random errors. Okay. Now let's do question number.
Yes.
Let's do question number 20. A student carries out a series of
What about
determinations.
19? Question number 19.
19. Wait, I think I missed it. Sorry. Let's do question number 19. The prefix centi indicates 10 to the power of minus 2. That is 1 centimeter is equal to 1 to the power of minus 2 meter. Which line in the table correctly indicates the prefixes micro, nano, and pico? So we have done this. And
C.
do you remember? Okay, so 10 to the 12 is pico, nano,
Yeah, pico is
micro. Yeah, perfect.
nano
That
is
is
minus 9.
perfect. So this is C. Okay, we know this. We have done this table, so no need to do any further. If you still need any hints, if you cannot remember it, the hint is like 10 to the 6 is micro always, and the thing is you can remember 10 to the power of minus 9 as nano, like 9 and nano.
Is nano. Nano
Okay,
God.
yeah, so basically
Yeah,
from there you
nano
can
God.
basically see. Okay, now let's look at the 20th one. This one is important, that's why I moved to this one first, because I am excited about this one. So let's see. A student carries out a series of determinations of the acceleration of free fall g. The table below shows her results. So these are her results when she conducted her experiments. Now, what is the value of acceleration of free fall? What is the value of gravity? We know
Yeah.
that this is 9.8. In reality,
9
this is 9.8.
meter per second.
Now, if I ask you, are these results precise? Are they
Yeah,
close to each
precise.
other?
Yeah, yes, they are. They are precise,
They are precise, yes. So they are,
but not accurate.
but not accurate. So which option will we choose? It is not accurate, but it is precise. So we'll go with
B.
D.
B.
Perfect.
The more precise ones are the one are called random, and the accurate are systematic.
Yeah. So I think I think we've done enough of these. Let's move to the theory now. What do you say? Should we do theory?
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, theory.
So this is one question from theory. So let's start with this one. So let's read the question first. So the question is, I think I should close this one. Okay. Okay. The volume of tank in the fuel of a car is monitored using a meter as illustrated in figure 1.1. The meter has an analog scale. The meter reading for different volumes of fuel in the tank is shown in figure 1.2. So these are the meter readings for different volumes of fuel in the tank. Okay.
The meter has analog, the meter reading.
Okay.
Done.
So these are the values of, and this is the graph below. This is the meter. This is the picture of the meter, and this is the graph. Now the meter is calibrated in terms of fraction of the tank that remains filled with fuel. So this tells you basically the fraction of the tank that is filled with fuel. So basically, if your meter is over here, that means the whole tank is full. The whole tank is full. Okay. If it is over here, this means 3/4 or 75% of the tank is full. If it is over
Right.
here, this means 1/2 of the tank is full. And if it is over here, where it is shown right out, it means only 25% of the tank is full. If it is over here, this means that the tank is empty. It is empty. Okay, that's what this means.
Understood.
Okay. So now let's see what they are asking. The car uses 1 liter of fuel when traveling 14 kilometers. The car starts the journey with a full tank of fuel. Calculate the volume of fuel remaining after a journey of 210 kilometers. So you can simply, this one is pretty simple. So all you need to do is you can use I think you can use ratio method, you can use unitary method. So for 1 liter of fuel, we are
That
traveling
means
14 kilometers,
14.
right?
So
And
how much
basically,
would give 2
yeah,
times? So 2 times 1/14.
yeah, exactly. So this will be like you will multiply like this, and x will be
50. 15.
Yeah, 210 by 14. It is what is the answer that you are getting?
15.
Okay,
15.
15. 15. Okay, perfect. So okay, so now they're saying this is the volume that has been used. Okay, so read the questions carefully. Now they're saying calculate the volume of fuel remaining. So you have to be careful about this. Calculate the volume of fuel remaining. So
85.
what's the total volume at the start? Let's see. They have not given us the full volume.
No, we can use graph for it, I guess.
Yeah, it is here. It is
Yeah,
60.
15.
Shall we? Okay, yeah, it is 60. Okay, so when we can see from the graph that when it is full, it is at 60. So it means that the capacity of the tank is 60 liters basically.
So 45 is remaining.
Yeah,
45
so 45
liters.
is remaining. So the remaining volume is 45. Use your answer in one and figure 1.2 to determine the change in the meter reading during the 210. Okay, so they're saying we will use this answer and figure 1.2 to determine the change in the meter reading. So let's see what will be the meter reading now. Now our tank is at 45. So we will see 45 is almost over here. We will go across this and we are over here now.
3 by 4.
Yes, so it is almost 3 by 4, a little bit above 3 by 4, but yeah, we can count this as 3 by 4. Okay,
Yeah.
so from full to the tank went from full to 3 by 4. We can even calculate it, but they asked us to use the graph, so we have to use the graph. So the change in meter reading from full to 3 by 4. So initially the tank was full, now only 3 by 4 of it is left. State the feature of figure 1.2 that indicates that there is a systematic error. Now this one is conceptual. There is a systematic error. Which feature of this graph indicates that there is a systematic error? What do you think?
We know that the line does not pass through the intercept.
Yeah, exactly. So the thing is, if this scale was accurate, then if the tank was empty, then the scale should show that there is no fuel in the tank. It is at zero. But the thing is, even when the tank is empty, we can see from the graph that the scale will show that basically it is. Wait, sorry. The thing is, when there are 5 liters left, there is still 5 liters left, and the meter will show zero. The meter will show it as 0 point, although there are 5 liters left. Okay, although there are 5 liters left in the car, it will show 0 meter, zero, like the reading will show zero. Okay, so that is a systematic error. Okay, that is a systematic error. Now they're saying suggest why. For this meter, it is an advantage to have this systematic error. Why do you think this is an advantage? I know this sounds confusing. You might be thinking like, how can an error have an advantage? But think about it. How does this have an advantage? Let's say you're driving a car, okay, and you are worried about getting your petrol full. Okay, so the thing is, this meter,
Some fuel is like
yeah.
left.
So exactly,
Or
exactly. So
is it?
even when the meter is at zero, there is still some fuel. So you can go to the station or whatever. You can go there
Yeah.
and get your tank filled up again. You will have more time in case of an emergency. So that's why this is useful. In this case, systematic error is useful. So you see, errors are not always bad. They can be useful sometimes.
Oh, wait. So if the line passes through the intercept 0, that's a random error. And if it doesn't, it's a
No, no, no.
systematic error.
If it passes through zero, that does not mean like one of them have to exist. It does, like, you don't have to always pick between them. It is also possible that there is no systematic error and there is no random error. So let's say if the line was like this,
Hmm.
in that case there is no random error and no systematic error.
Right.
Okay, so let's see. A simple pendulum may be used to determine a value for the acceleration of free fall. Measurements are made for the length of the pendulum and period t of the pendulum. The values obtained with their uncertainties are as shown. Calculate the percentage uncertainty in the measurement of period t. So I told you to measure the percentage uncertainty, you need to find the fractional uncertainty first. And how will you find the fractional uncertainty? So I will do this one, you will do for the length. So for t, the fractional uncertainty will be 0.03 divided by 1.93. This will be the fractional uncertainty, and then you will multiply it with 100. Okay, and your answer will be 0.03 divided by 1.93 multiplied by 100.
1.55.
Yeah, so it is 1.55%. This is percentage uncertainty, so you have to say 1.55%. So you can put
Why
it
do you
like,
keep dividing it by 1.93?
because 1.93 is the value of time. So you see, I told you like this is dt. Okay, let me show you. So this is let me yeah, let me change the color. uh, where is the format? Let me see if I can open it from here. Summarize, and no, the format was somewhere over here, the format option. Mm, just give me 1 minute. Okay, let me just, okay, I will use this color again. So this one 0.03, this is actually the uncertainty of t dt. This is t, the value of t, you can see from here, and this is multiplied by 100. So you see, this is the same fractional uncertainty formula, fractional uncertainty multiplied by 100. So you can either you can either put plus minus, or you cannot, it is up to you. If you, even if you just write it like this 1.55, in that case it is
Should we
okay too.
should we round it off to 2 decimal places?
No, we don't need to, we don't need to
Mhm.
round off, like, yeah, for percentage, yeah, okay. The thing is, obviously, if you look at your answer, you will get like 1.554404145. That is a huge number. We don't need to put it like that. Okay. So for percentage, you can always go with two decimal figures. Okay. For percentage, you can always go with two decimal figures. I think that will be always pretty accurate. Always do the rounding off when you are dealing with actual uncertainty. So let's say
Mhm.
if you look over this figure, 1.93 plus minus 0.03. If you look over here, you will see in this case that they both are correct to the 100th. They both are correct to the same amount. You see, they both are rounded off to the same digit, to this place value basically. Okay. It is not like, I cannot write, if I'm writing the answer, I cannot write 1.932 plus minus
Mhm.
0.03. Then that would be wrong.
Right.
Oh, sorry, 0.03. If I want to write that, then I will have to add, if it is like this, then it is accurate. But if it is like this, then this is wrong. So the last value of both have to be the same. Okay, so we've calculated the percentage uncertainty to be 1.55%. Now for the next one, I want you to do it for the length. What will you do?
For the length, it's
1
1 over 92 times by 100.
1 over 92 by 100. So you see, one more thing
Oh,
that I forgot to tell is
give me
they have the same unit,
1.0.
centimeter. I don't need to
Oh,
convert it into meters because 1 is in centimeters and 92 is in centimeters. So if I place it like this, 1 centimeter over 92 centimeters, what happens is basically this cancels out automatically. So I don't need to
yes,
convert it into, I don't need to change its unit as long as they have the same unit.
right. So it would give 1.09%.
Yeah. So this will give me what?
1.09.
Okay, 1.09%, and that will be our answer. This will be our percentage uncertainty. Similarly, if I ask you to find the percent to if I ask you about the fraction uncertainty, in this case, it will be 0.015, 0.016 if you round it off, and in this case, it will be 0.011.
Yeah,
Okay,
0.011.
because we can just divide it by 100 to get fraction uncertainty. So percentage uncertainty and fractional uncertainty, we can change them very easily. So this is 1.011. 9. So plus minus is optional. If you want, you can put a plus minus over here. I'm putting it in brackets. Okay. They're saying this is the relation between. Okay, so now this is the question that I wanted to do. This is the type of question that I wanted to do. Calculate the percentage uncertainty in the value of G. So I can see that L and T square, they are being divided. So let me give you a quick revision about those rules that we did earlier. So we did some rules if you remember. So when you are multiplying two values A into B, in that case, uncertainties get added. If you are dividing, uncertainties get added. If you are like multiplying them with the number, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, anything, then the uncertainty gets multiplied by the same value. If you have something like this, like 6, if A is to the power of n, then n comes over here and basically you get your answer. So let me go back and let's do this question. So what I see is, let's
Wait,
deal with the fractional uncertainties first. Yeah.
the L is basically the length we got.
Yeah.
The
In the previous part.
previous one. Yep. And the T is the one we
Yeah.
got.
Yeah. The same. The L and T are the same as the values that like we got in the previous part. So let's see. I know that G is equal to 4 pi square L by T square. So first I will find the, always first start with the fractional uncertainty. So dG by G.
dg by g.
Yeah. Now I know what is this equal to? This is equal to, we don't count this in the fractional uncertainty. We don't count 4 pi square in the fractional uncertainty. So if you look over here, you will see we don't count it. In case of K, if you look at over here in the fifth rule, you will see the K is basically dC is equal to K times dA. It means basically you deal with it when you are measuring the uncertainty. You don't need to like find it directly. So let me just find. Okay, let's go back. I will tell you. So dG by G, I know it will be equal to dL over L plus, now this is, I'm applying another rule. I'm applying two rules at the same time. So L and T square are being divided. Okay, so I'm adding their fractional uncertainties, and also T is squared. T is squared. So I need to take 2 over here, 2 times d T over T, d T over T.
D
Okay,
over
this is the fractional uncertainty of G. So I know that the fractional uncertainty of G is, so what was the uncertainty in length? In length, the uncertainty was 0.0109, right? From the previous part, we know that 0.0109 plus 2 times what was the uncertainty in T? 1.55. So we will convert it into fractional uncertainty. So this will become 0.0155. And this will give me, let me calculate quickly, multiplied by 2. 0.0419. So I can round it up to 0.042, let's say. That is pretty accurate. So 0.042. This is my fractional uncertainty in the value of G. Now what I need to do is, they're asking me for the percentage uncertainty. Okay, so this is the fractional uncertainty. So to find the percentage uncertainty, what I can do is I can multiply it with 100, right? So this will give me 4.2%. Now this gives us an interesting result. So if you look at this, what you will see is this was 1.5%. Okay, this was 1.09%. And now if I just do this, if instead of writing fractional uncertainties, if I just use fractional uncertainties, if I just do this 1.09 plus 2 times 1.55.
Why you are multiplying it by 2? That's the formula.
I'll tell you. In that case, again, we are getting 4.2% again. So the reason I am multiplying it is to tell you that even if you use percentage uncertainty or you use fractional uncertainty, the result will be the same. But you have to keep in mind, that when you are using percentage uncertainty, your answer will be a percentage uncertainty. And when you are using fractional uncertainty, your answer will be a fractional uncertainty. Okay, so this is for percentage uncertainty of DG.
And the above one is for the fractional uncertainty.
Yeah, so all the rules that exist for fractional uncertainty, they also follow for percentage uncertainty. So all the rules, so let me show you over here. We have all of these rules. So what I mean is, if you have this, then this also means that percentage uncertainty of DC, let me use a different color. So this basically means that the percentage uncertainty of DC is basically equal to the percentage uncertainty of DA plus percentage uncertainty of DB. Okay.
Are you writing somewhere? I can't see your screen.
Okay, sorry. I think you cannot share the screen. You cannot see the screen. This one. Can you see it now?
Oh, yes.
Okay. I forgot to turn the screen share on. Okay. So this is what I brought. So this also holds for percentage uncertainty, this formula. And similarly, for the deviant case, so for the deviant case again, percentage uncertainty of DC is basically equal to DA plus DB. Okay. For this one, this is pretty accurate. In this case, we are not using fractional uncertainty, so we cannot change it into percentage uncertainty directly. Okay. So fractional uncertainty and percentage uncertainty, they are interchangeable. Either I can use fractional uncertainty or percentage uncertainty. This is not fractional uncertainty. This is just the normal uncertainty, the exact value of uncertainty. That's why I cannot change it with the percentage one. Okay. And in this case, in DC over C1, I can also write percentage uncertainty in C is equal to n times percentage uncertainty of A. Okay. So all the rules that were there for fractional uncertainty, they also exist for percentage uncertainties. So let me write this part over here. So let me see if I can change the color. Okay, let's write this first. As shown above, in blue color, all the rules also apply to okay, so that's a common way to remember it. Okay, so let me also convert this into blue. Okay, so that is there, and yeah, all the rules that you have that for apply to fractional uncertainties, they can also apply to percentage uncertainties. I hope that's clear. Okay.
You can highlight this in yellow.
Okay, so I will stop the recording now.